The earth element, Demeter, Rhea, Gaia. Earth is the most complex element. Why is it the most complex? Because it is the strongest, and it came first. It is like a mother, who is always the most powerful figure in everything that happens. It is like the great goddess. As the ancient Greeks said, our breath comes from the one mother, meaning that it was the foremost. And naturally, all foundations, all forces, and all characteristics of your consciousness, your physiology, and your psyche, all originate from it. Moreover, it is earth that endows basic rights. It is earth that fundamentally and initially determines what a person can or cannot do. It defines their field of responsibility, the range of what they can achieve and what they will have the right to. Earth teaches them how to defend themselves against excessive fire. It places in their hands the power to handle that fire. And indeed, all the Greek myths tell us precisely this. The ancients said that the earth has 3 layers. The first layer is simple. It is the earth that nourishes us, the earth that takes our body and dust after death, returning them as nourishment to her other children. In the realm of this earth, nothing ever disappears completely. Everything follows its cycle and returns to nature. Typically, this is exactly how it works with animals and plants. Their life ends, and the earth takes them back. And in human consciousness, where earth is represented 3 times, this function exists as well. This is the Muladhara chakra, the first chakra, which corresponds to the first layer of earth, known as the layer of Demeter, named after the goddess of fertility. As we understand, under normal circumstances, our physical body undergoes exactly the same process as any other physical object that ceases to exist. However, a person is not just a physical body, a person is much more than that. And Earth also has a second layer, which suggests that a person can reach it because they possess such abilities. This level is called the layer of Rhea, named after the goddess, the mother of Demeter, who is much older in both age and essence. Rhea, also known as Rhea Cybele in the ancient Phrygian tradition, is the goddess who preserves memory, but she does not allow just anyone to enter her layer. She lets in those who possess sufficient fervor and an understanding that fire must be equal to earth, that this primary law must be upheld. On the layer of Rhea Cybele, all memory is preserved in its entirety. To allow in excessive fire would mean risking the destruction of that memory, because fire is capable of consuming everything but itself, and doing so irreversibly. And so, Rhea checks and tests those who enter, ensuring they meet the necessary safety and ability parameters. In human consciousness, this level is specifically projected onto the Buddhic body. It is there that we encounter the earth element for the second time, but this time in combination with fire. We know that the Buddhic body, on the elemental cross, opens precisely when fire and earth are in balance. If fire prevails over earth, it poses a threat. And one cannot enter the level of Rhea with such an imbalance of the elements. She won't allow it. Conversely, if earth prevails too much over fire, it will be insufficient. Too little fire will not bring your consciousness to that level. So it must be exactly the right amount of fire. In this sense, Efremov's cult classic Thais of Athens provides an accurate description of this process, particularly in the episode where Thais and her retinue arrive at the temple of Rhea Cybele while awaiting Alexander's army. In this part, the rules for priestesses and warriors are described, with the priestesses wearing red and black net veils, the day priestesses and the night ones. And only a man, a warrior, with strong enough passion could tear through that net veil. However, if his fire of passion proved insufficient, then anyone who dared to approach a priestess wearing a red net veil but failed to tear it would remain alive, yet he would be castrated. He would become a slave and a eunuch in that temple, thus demonstrating that although you may live and serve some purpose, you should never be able to produce offspring. You dared to reach for what was not yours. You thought too highly of yourself and your passion, but in reality, it was hardly passion at all. As for a man who directed his passionate desires towards the black priestess of Rhea, the night Lamia, and was shamed by his failure, he was killed on the spot. This image is presented in an allegorical form, and I must say that Efremov was an excellent archivist and historian. This allegory precisely conveys the forces and rules embodied by the priestesses, who understood and maintained contact with their goddess. They simply translated into human language the information she transmitted to them. Today, however, we know and understand much more. We possess a slightly different metaphysics of consciousness and can help ourselves by recognizing that the level of Rhea Cybele serves as a storage of information. In order to access this information, one must possess sufficiently strong fire, though not a fire that surpasses the will of the goddess herself. And only when she sees that a person's consciousness, specifically their Buddhic body, fulfills the law of equilibrium, and that they are strong enough to properly receive and release this information while respecting the mother and remembering her primary power and fundamental rights, will Rhea bestow her information, memory, and ancient knowledge, and she will do so only upon such a warrior, such a person, such a wandering seeker mage. Naturally, we are speaking about them, about ancient magical knowledge. For the third time, the earth element appears at the Sahasrara chakra alongside all the other elements. And of course, this is yet another layer of earth, the level of Gaia, the primordial mother, who established the law of equilibrium between the elements and their endless competition, their ceaseless motion as they pursue one another, moving counterclockwise along the wheel of the year. It was Gaia who established the basic laws of nature. She did not create humans, nor did she create gods. She gave birth to the elemental titans. She created them so that they would be equal to one another. When the gods began to slay the elemental titans, as told in the section of Greek mythology known as the Titanomachy, a natural imbalance arose. And then the law came into effect. The one who kills the dragon becomes the dragon himself. Having defeated the titans, the primordial gods, Zeus, Cronus and others, including Rhea, began to fulfill this function themselves. At the same time, they introduced rules for regulating the elemental forces, taking into account their natural lack. It was the layer of Rhea that formed the second circle, the prototype of the second circle of the proto-foundations. Now let us look at the three circles scheme, the structural model of the proto-foundations and the elements, the three magical circles with which we constantly work. Here, we see that there is the outer circle, the second circle within it, and the innermost circle. If we apply what I have just shared with you, we will find the layer of Gaia in the outermost, most important circle. This outer circle is closed off both from humans and from a part of the gods. The gods themselves formed the second circle. They created a system that allows them to control the inner circle, compensating for the lack of natural elements. The inner circle is the layer of Demeter, where ordinary humans live, and it is here that all biological life takes place. The elements are present, yet in a changed, transformed form. This altered form, of course, cannot be compared to the power of the primal gods, the Titans. Still, the second circle was created to control and compensate for humanity's deficiency in these elements. It was intended to increase them where they are lacking and reduce them when they are in excess. The story of Prometheus bringing fire to humanity is, in fact, a tale of broken agreements. Just imagine for a moment that the force of fire entered the circle where humans live. As a result, a sharp imbalance occurred, a very sharp one. In truth, Prometheus was not chained because he stole fire from Hephaestus's forge, but because his actions disrupted the fragile law of equilibrium. And although, according to legend, human reality began to evolve from culture into civilization, this happened at such an untimely moment, as the same old myths tell us, that Prometheus was punished. In fact, it is said that he was punished not only for this, but also because he knew a certain prophecy. Well, history remains silent on this matter for now, but we shall certainly return to it in the general theory of magic course when the time comes. For the moment, however, we are speaking solely about the elements. It is extremely dangerous to bring the elements directly from the first circle into the inner circle if, within consciousness, right here, there is no buffer. A buffer that upholds the mandatory law of equilibrium. In essence, this law of equilibrium functions as an antivirus program, an anti-meteorite shield, or the Earth's atmosphere, call it what you will. On the one hand, it protects against an excess of the elements, and if it becomes impossible to defend against that excess, then, by engaging the law of equilibrium, it increases all the other elements accordingly. However, within the inner circle, within the inner world where people live, it is simpler and even preferable to reduce any excess of the elements, because such an excess would lead to an immediate collapse for 99% of those living in this world, potentially even resulting in death. It is precisely for this reason that the egregorial layer, in its original purpose, was intended to serve as protection. It was meant to deliver information in measured doses, to shield against excessive elements, and to provide anything additional in small portions, under no circumstances disrupting the law of equilibrium within the inner circle. And only a small number of people, those who practiced elemental magic and trained themselves within these currents, had the opportunity to use the power of the elements locally and precisely, in a specific place, in a particular situation, and toward a particular person. But even then, they could only do so within the boundaries of their own sphere of interest or competence. And you will feel this too. You have your own reality, and within this reality, you control your own elements. However, the moment you attempt to extend your influence into someone else's domain, You will feel and come to understand what the anger of the egregorial world is. Zero, it should also be said straight away that the original intention, the idea that the second circle of the proto-foundations, namely the proto-foundations tradition, freedom, good and evil, would protect the human world, as usual, turned into a complete mess. It was precisely there that religious systems began to parasitize. They embedded within themselves the principle, the original principle of the second circle, the principle of protection and preservation. Overall, there is little to blame them for. They do fulfill the common mission. Unfortunately, the program of the second circle does not prohibit the methods they use to fulfill this mission, nor the purposes for which they do so. This is precisely why such a total restructuring is taking place now. The second circle must be eliminated entirely. Of course, very few people are capable of living without the second circle, interacting directly with the elements and regulating them within their own consciousness, without the egregorial world. But their number is steadily growing, and we too are joining their ranks. Everyone else will not disappear, they will simply depart along with the second circle, collapse into a single point, and outwardly it will seem as if nothing has happened to them. Yet on a global level, they will simply cease to exist as full participants in the space of magical possibilities. However, I go into much greater detail on this in the General Theory of Magic course during the first 5 lessons. So please do visit the forum. This section is closed, but it opens under certain conditions. If you have not started the course yet, you are most welcome to join. The entire course has been made available to you, well, conditionally available, but nonetheless it is open to the students of the Menshikova school.